We all have to modify curriculum for our kids, but there's a little bit extra consideration for our gifted kids. So, how do you modify Sonlight's Level P Exploring God's World for a gifted 4-year-old? That's the short answer. Hi guys, it's Kathleen. I'm a homeschool graduate, homeschool mom, a learning enthusiast, and a mom to a gifted kid as well as a gifted person myself. I discovered my son was gifted around the time I bought this curriculum, and it took me a lot of trial and error to figure out how I needed to modify this for him. First step to modify this or any Sonlight curriculum for a gifted kid, nix a bunch of stuff. It is an all-in-one curriculum, so by that definition, gifted kids will need a bunch of it cut out. So I started out with cutting out the math. He did not need any of that. He was beyond that level. Sonlight also has in the kit, under math, these amazing stencils, which Montessori actually considers them a handwriting prep, not math prep. I got them because I wanted extra preparation with handwriting control, even though my son, of his own initiative, asked to start learning how to write when he was 3. So I got this, and it's just too tedious for him. So we nixed this. I did not bother buying the Dr. Seuss ABC book because he knew his ABCs. I did not bother buying the Usborne's First 1,000 Words because he's gifted, he doesn't need that book. I did not bother buying the Spanish 1,000 Words because I have a bit of a beef with how a kid is supposed to learn a foreign language. That's another video. I did not buy the Developing the Early Learner series because he was beyond several of the books and we already had another critical thinking book. I had high hopes for the practical life that they had in here, but honestly, he was doing most of this by age 2, and that's because I was doing a whole bunch of Montessori stuff with him anyways. If your kid did not grow up with helping you in the kitchen for chores, helping you around the house, or even exposure to Montessori methods, this may or may not be useful for your kid. Okay, so that's all my immediate, just fresh out of the gate nixes. Now let's talk about the different sections. First, we'll go with Bible. I did nix the memory verses because we were doing a separate memory work, because we were doing something else for memory work. So it could be useful if you have a gifted kid, but just be sensitive with how you teach them to memorize. And if you're interested in what you need to watch out for memorization, drop that down in the comments because I have opinions from me growing up and all the memorization that I did or did not do with it and what I found to work with my own son. So if you want my input on memorization with gifted kids, just drop down in the comments. I'll be happy to make a video for you. And then for the actual Bible storybook, they have the 101 favorite stories from the Bible. They have it on the schedule for 3 days a week for a 4-day program, but we've had to modify that because my son wants his routine and he always wants to start out with a Bible story whenever we sit down on the couch for our school-related reading. So yeah, throughout the schedule with the Bible storybook. Okay, let's move on to science. Sonlight has a great book that they start the year out with and actually spend most of the year on, and it's the Bernstein Bears' Big Book of Science Nature. Stephen really loved the content in here, but my biggest beef is the schedule. So Sonlight would have you start on this page on one day, when yesterday you read these 2 pages. And then you would only do 2 more pages the next day, and it would break up each section into multiple days. And the cutoff point within the sections were really, really weird. So that is one thing to be aware of. Your gifted kid will not allow that, and actually I would expect most kids not to allow that. So be prepared to read section by section and blaze through this book probably in less than a month if you read it every day, or you can stretch it out and read it once a week. But yes, this was a fun book, just do not stay on schedule with this. The other things I noted was The Year at Maple Hill Farm. My kid loved this when he was 2. At 4, he was bored with it. So again, they spread this entire book out of over a week and we read it in one afternoon. And then we read all these books. They spread these out over several weeks at the end of the year, and we read this entire set in one afternoon. I also want to note, I'm going to put this in a full review of Sonlight later, but these books are a lot more challenging than the Bernstein Bears science books. So that was a little bit unusual for me, the big jump that they did with that. I had to move the camera so I could grab this book. Let's get to read-alouds. This book here is scheduled once a day, once a week for the entire year. And my son actually asked me to stop it because he claimed it was boring. I agree. I was really disappointed that the instructor guide for Sonlight did not have any discussion questions for the story of art. And we've gone through this book when he was 2 or 3, I think, so he already knew it. And just sitting there with my limited knowledge of art and what to talk about, it was not working for us. So after a couple months of doing this, I nixed this because he asked me to. For the other read-alouds, we've only gotten through a couple of them, Stories of the World and the Lion Storyteller bedtime book. He enjoyed the stories, but I think it would have been one of those take it or leave it situations, and I did not see anything I had to modify about the schedule because he was not begging me to read more of these. Same thing with Children's Book of Virtues. This is where we're at now. And then the other read-alouds that are coming up, Uncle Widdley's bedtime stories and Molly Mandy's storybook. I fully expect us to be taking those one chapter or one story at a time. And I don't think there's going to be any modifications needed for a gifted kid unless your kid just begs you to keep reading, in which case you won't stay on schedule. There's a few more books and read-alouds that I've not gotten to. These I'm saving for when we get to Thailand and our cultural studies. This book was below his level. We went through this quickly. He was kind of bored with it. This book, People, he did enjoy it. We read it all in one day, like the schedule said, but months and months ahead of schedule. And now and then, I know he'll like this. We've not gotten to this one. I've not pulled it out yet, but I know he'll like this. So the short answer is just toss out the instruction guide, and let me turn the camera around so I can show you what I mean by that. Okay, here we have the famous Sonlight schedule. I'm going to show you in detail why I'm essentially saying throughout the instruction guide for pre-K for gifted kid. So your choice if you want to use this, your own materials. We never use a schedule for this right here. Oh, I forgot to mention poetry. We already had our own book, which I'm going through. So I chose not to actually buy this one. But if you did do poetry, I would suggest you do a spread or two a day and not their little bits over several days. Pre-reading writing, my kid was ahead of this. Math, he was ahead of this. The science, we never stayed on schedule. And all of this, he was ahead on, or I wanted to use something different. So it was essentially, we used this section and this section and never stayed on schedule. And then for the actual helps beyond here, the only discussion questions were in here. And actually for this Bible storybook, they have discussion questions within the book. So I did not see the need to pull this out every week because the discussion questions are just to help with attention and retention. The stories from around the world. So everything else is just activity ideas for what you've read. It's not discussion questions, which will be helpful for me. And while playing and in connection with learning is a phenomenal idea, I've been doing so many other things that I just did not get this out. This was not going to be useful for me. And then again, practical life. He already knew how to do most of this or the developmental activities. So I hope that was helpful for you on how we modify Sonlight. I would expect that to be fairly consistent for the upper levels, throwing out the schedule, throwing out at least half of the content because of asynchronous development. And the discussion questions may or may not be useful in the future with the older levels, so you'll just have to be aware of that. If you do want to see what we ended up doing for his pre-K year, click this video that I've got right here to see my curriculum picks.